Hello friends, this time I bring you an interesting video where we will talk about the best arcs of the Baki series. I clarify in advance that this is just my personal opinion, but remember that you can share yours in the comments section. In this list, we will go through all the arcs from the beginning to the most recent arc of the manga, so please tell me what you think of each part of the series. Let me know if you differ from my opinion. This will be a list from worst to best arc, so let's start with number 11. The Ali Jr. arc is, for me, the worst of all, and now I will explain why. Firstly, when Ali Jr. first appears, he gets a lot of spotlight, making it seem like he's going to be one of the most significant characters in the series. The young boxer is the son of the living legend, Muhammad Ali, a man even the ogre Yujiro Hanma came to respect. Jr. carries that legacy, pushing him to make a name for himself in the boxing world. Well, one could say the boy made it since he became a globally renowned boxer. However, this wasn't enough for him, so he set out to find the strongest man in the world to test himself, driven more by pride than anything else. At that time, Baki was already recognized as the strongest man on Earth. Let's not forget that Yujiro isn't even considered human anymore. He's the strongest creature on Earth. So, when we talk about the strongest man on Earth, we're referring to Baki. Many of us thought that Junior was here to stay, and that he might become a character who would join Baki's group after fighting him. The guy defeated significant characters like Doppo Orochi and Goki Shibukagawa. Junior beat them using just boxing techniques. I don't know why many tend to downplay these wins when they were utterly clean victories. The truth is, in the end, those victories didn't do much for him. Up to this point, Ali Jr. was still an imposing character. The guy seemed seriously determined. In fact, Junior also went to China with Baki and the others to participate in the Centennial Tournament. The guy did well in the tournament, defeating a couple of opponents, but his presence was overshadowed by Baki and Yujiro throughout. To be honest, during this part of the story, his involvement felt pretty flat. Later, when they returned to Japan, Junior declared war on Baki. He challenged him to a fight and even claimed he would take Baki's girlfriend. Junior genuinely wanted to crush Baki. It was as if he'd harbored resentment against him for years. Obviously, Baki didn't get riled up by the boxer's words. In fact, he remained very composed. The moment when this character began to fall apart was when he faced Jack Hanma, who gave him the beating of his life. Junior barely managed to land a few punches on Jack. In fact, Jack treated him like a punching bag. In short, it was a complete humiliation for Junior. Luckily for him, no one was watching. At this point, we could see the great difference in power between Junior and Baki. I think this defeat destroyed some of the hype surrounding this character. We knew he couldn't beat Baki, but after seeing the beating Jack gave him, this was confirmed. We also shouldn't forget that Doppo and Goki came back for a rematch with Junior, taking advantage of his weakened state to beat him up. The truth is that in this series, there are no excuses. A fighter must be ready for a fight anytime, anywhere. Still, Doppo and Goki's actions seemed cowardly to me. They could have waited at least a week for the boy to recover, but instead, they challenged him when he was in terrible shape. To make matters worse, even his father challenged him to a fight that time. Here we must be honest. Ali's father took advantage of the situation because he knew he could never beat his son in a fair fight. All these events shadowed the character development that had been built up, and now it seemed impossible for him to beat Baki. And finally, what buried both Ali Jr. and this entire arc was the final fight. Baki totally humiliated Junior. The guy didn't even break a sweat and defeated the boxer in a matter of seconds. Undoubtedly, the lowest point of this arc is its antagonist, Ali Jr. What's even worse is that no further depth was given to Junior after his defeat, as all focus shifted to Baki and Yujiro. Junior was essentially pushed to the sidelines unexpectedly, and the character development he underwent seemed pointless. Some may have liked this arc better, and I understand that. At first, it seemed like it was going to be one of the best arcs of the series, but I never liked the way things concluded. I also didn't like how Ali Jr. was treated throughout those chapters. The guy hasn't even made an appearance since that tremendous humiliation at the hands of the other fighters. I understand that the story needed to build up Baki as the strongest man on Earth, but I think there were better ways to do it. I don't remember another character as mistreated as Ali Jr. This arc didn't quite convince me, but I must admit it had some notable moments, so let's talk about them. Obviously, the fight between Kaku and Yujiro was the highlight of this arc, and to be honest, the only truly significant one. In the other fights, we saw the foreign team wiping the floor with the Chinese fighters, as if instead of a tournament, it was just a practice day for Baki and the others. Speaking of Baki, he faced some challenges, which is understandable since he was under the effects of Yanagi's poison and couldn't fight at his full potential in all his matches. Ali Jr. had it relatively easy. However, his participation went unnoticed, and to tell the truth, I didn't think he was a really important character at the time. I don't know about you, but to me his participation in this story arc seemed unnecessary. I understand that he was supposed to be there for us to get to know him better, but on the other hand, if he were to be removed from the team and replaced by any other character, things would go on as planned. The fight between Retsu and Jaku was the most evenly matched of the entire tournament. Retsu was superior in terms of technique and experience, but Jaku showed that he could trick him and make him fall in the traps. We could say this guy genuinely angered the Kenpo master. Although Retsu emerged as the winner in the end, it was not a total beating like what we saw in the other fights. Speaking of beatings, Oliva Biscuit also joined Baki's team and fought twice in this tournament. In the first one, he literally crushed a poor guy who bragged about having the toughest body in China. Biscuit made a fool of him in front of everyone and also took the opportunity to show off his muscles. His second match was more interesting as he faced off against Shoban, who didn't make things easy for him. Shoban knocked Biscuit to the ground multiple times, and for a moment, I thought he might take the win. This could be described as the most explosive fight of the tournament, as no one expected Shoban to be able to dominate Mr. Unchained in that way. This fight adds value to the arc, but not enough to consider it one of the best. Kaku vs. Yujiro redeemed this arc and in fact was the most anticipated fight. It was quite obvious that Baki and the others were going to win their fights. The only fighter of interest was Kaku. Yujiro stated that the last fight was the most important, and he was right since everyone wanted to see the old man in action. The fight was quite good, and at times, the Sea Emperor gave the ogre a hard time. However, the match came to its conclusion when Yujiro activated his demon back and defeated the old man. Well, in reality, Kaku faked his death to avoid a clean defeat. He was very proud and was not willing to let the whole country see him defeated by a foreigner. As for the fights, I'd give them a score of 5 out of 10 since very few had any real significance. We could say this tournament was a total humiliation for the local team. Narratively, this arc doesn't seem very important. I mean, the goal of the tournament was to name a new emperor of the sea, but this took a back seat, and it was always about the battle of pride between Kaio and Yujiro Hanma. However, the rest of the team seemed to lack a real purpose for participating. Baki hoped to face his father in this tournament, but in the end, he teamed up with him, so he didn't achieve his goal. Ali Jr. also had no clear goal, and Oliva Biscuit was limited to accompanying Dorian, who was in no condition to participate. Retsu joined the Chinese team to save his country's pride, but he only had one relevant fight, and his participation went rather unnoticed. I think his most significant contribution was helping Baki recover from Yanagi's poison. I feel that this arc had a lot of potential, but in the end, there were few relevant moments, as Baki and the others didn't have a clear goal as they did in the Ultimate Tournament, where everyone wanted to become champions. In this tournament, the best fighter was to be named Emperor of the Sea, but this apparently never interested Baki and the others. Despite that, we could say that Baki and Yujiro experienced some development in their father-son relationship, as for the first time, we saw them team up to defeat a common enemy. So in the end, we took away some positive aspects from this arc. Many may not share my opinion, but personally, I see this arc as one of the slowest in the series. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's bad, but compared to the previous parts, the Unchained arc felt less intense. In this arc, we only had one significant fight, and that was Oliva versus Baki. The fight against Kivaru was very disappointing. He was an intriguing character, but unfortunately, he was entirely wasted, which is sad since he's one of the fan favorites. The plot of this arc revolves around Baki trying to defeat the strongest man in America, who at that time was the closest fighter to Yujiro in terms of power. As everyone knows, Baki managed to defeat Mr. Unchained and instantly positioned himself as the second strongest man in the world. So in short, Baki achieved his goal. The problem was that some episodes seemed too long and slow. without much significance, making it seem like Baki's confrontation with Oliva Biscuit would never happen. It is impossible to forget that fight between Oliva and Gavaru, in which they both grab a handkerchief, and the first one to drop it is the loser. Biscuit defeated Gavaru with a powerful punch, making it clear that if he got serious, he could beat him in an instant. This became evident after seeing the outcome of his fight against Baki. It was clear that Gavaru was several notches below the two of them. Basically, Gavaru looked like the god who talks a lot, but doesn't back it up with facts. The Mounts seemed to be strong and intriguing characters, but then we discovered their only purpose was to show us how strong Gavaru was. After that, they never reappeared, and one could say their potential was entirely wasted. I liked the prison setting, as it showed the hierarchical levels of the place. Yet, I wished for a more intense environment, reflecting what one would expect from a maximum security prison, holding America's deadliest inmates. The fight between Oliva and Baki was very good, and I believe it lived up to expectations. The thing is, if you take away this fight, there's practically nothing interesting left in the remaining chapters. This part of the story is a transitional arc to develop Baki on his journey to defeat Yujiro, so it makes sense they didn't dive deep into the others. But honestly, it felt kinda like when they went to China. Many of you might be surprised to see this arc ranked above the previous one. However, I believe this part of the series has better moments, and I'll explain why. A lot of fans despise the scene where Nomi took down Oliva Biscuit in a sumo match, but for me, this fight served its purpose. This battle was written to be shocking and to introduce Nomi, the antagonist of the arc. You could say it was an explosive way to start this manga arc. After defeating Oliva, it became clear to all of us that this guy wasn't going to be an easy antagonist to beat. Plus, we saw that he ranked high on the power scale. He didn't look like a man with bad intentions, but his size and strength made him look imposing. I think his character design was perfect for a sumo wrestler. I must admit that, at first, I couldn't connect with this character as I did with others. But as the story progressed, this fighter started to interest me, and after his fight against Jack, he earned all my respect. The best part of this story arc was the fight between Nomi and Jack. Jack Hanma returned after being absent for a long time. He came back taller and more muscular than ever. But the most interesting thing is that he came back with titanium teeth after losing his natural teeth in his last fight. All the fans went crazy with Jack's return and expected him to defeat the sumo god and prove that he was a worthy opponent for Yujiro Hanma. In the end, Jack did it. He defeated Nomi in a fierce fight in the underground arena. It was during this fight that Jack earned the nickname Biting Cyborg. Furthermore, this was the moment he challenged all the stronger fighters, including his brother Baki and his father Yujiro. One could deduce the new Jack, who is now more determined than ever to defeat his father. On the other hand, the tournament against the sumo wrestlers didn't really grab my interest. It was thanks to Jack's comeback and Oliva's rematch that this arc escaped being labeled the worst in the series. Baki had fewer fights in this part of the story, but that gave his brother Jack some time to shine. It's also worth mentioning that towards the end of this arc, Oliva Biscuit made an epic return and got a rematch against the Rikishi. It was a solid fight and left all the fans demanding justice for Mr. Unchained satisfied. I think Itagaki captured his love for sumo in all those chapters of the manga, so it would be nice if fans would appreciate this part of the story and not just focus on the negative aspects. But in any case, I would love to know your favorite moments of this manga arc and also to know what you would change and what you think were the low points of the arc. The prehistoric caveman arc is without a doubt one of my favorites. I think it's a favorite among many fans as well. Personally, I prefer the manga version, but the animated adaptation is not bad either. In this part of the story, we witnessed 4 amazing fights, and in each one of them, the caveman proved that he is the ultimate predator. What I liked most about this arc were the interactions between the characters. We got to see the deep friendship between Baki and Retsu, and we also saw the brotherly bond between Baki and Jack. These subtle moments are appreciated in a series where almost everything revolves around fighting. It's rare to see characters talking about anything other than fights. Pickle struck me as a good antagonist. Although he didn't speak any modern language, he understood the situation he was in. I especially liked the scenes where Pickle cried every time he defeated an opponent. He even prayed and danced, adding a human vibe to the character. Pickle underwent significant growth throughout this arc. Initially, he was a creature fighting solely for food. However, after meeting Baki and his friends, a new emotion was awakened in him. Pickle stopped fighting just for food and started fighting for his pride as a fighter. The thrill he felt fighting against Baki and the others was something no dinosaur from his time could have given him. The T-Rex didn't possess the fighting spirit the warriors of this era showcased, and that made him happy. Pickle won all his fights, which I thought was a good move. Even Yujiro was surprised by his immense strength during a bout of physical strength. It would have been a shock to see Pickle defeat the strongest creature on Earth. I think the MVP of this arc was Katsumi. It was amazing to see him prepare for his showdown with Pickle. He knew it was the most important fight of his life, and he gave it his all on the battlefield. Even Pickle acknowledged Katsumi as a worthy adversary, being willing to make him his meal to honor the promise he had made to him. I really loved the character development both Jack and Katsumi underwent. I believe they took away the most significant lessons after their encounters with Pickle. As for the fights, I'd say this arc surpasses the previous ones, but I still think the manga fights were a bit better. I guess we all saw those epic clips from the manga featuring Pickle's fights with great music in the background, so you'll know what I'm talking about. For many, Baki's fight against Pickle was a bit disappointing, but I personally don't think it was bad enough to detract points from this arc. But hey, let me know what you think about this arc, and which fight has been your favorite. This arc is where we meet more strong fighters, as it features the first underground tournament in which Baki participates. The fights are good, and the interactions between the characters interesting. Until recently, I thought this arc was rather flat with little narrative content, but upon rewatching it I realized I was wrong. This arc gave us several memorable moments, like the fight between Doppo and Yujiro. That was one of the best fights of the series, and Doppo became one of the few men who have been able to give Yujiro a good fight. But without a doubt, what I liked the most was the participation of Koreha Shinagi. We know him as a good guy who loves being a doctor to help people, but he wasn't always like this. He used to be a selfish individual who only thought about himself. Koreha used to perform experiments on his patients without caring about the consequences. What he didn't expect was that one of his victims would be the one to change his life. At the end of the tournament, Koreha was in very bad shape after losing to Baki, and to save himself, he needed a blood donation. What he did not expect was that a girl he had harmed in the past offered to donate blood, even though he had been a very bad person. I loved the character development that Koreha had in this arc. Baki also had great development, and his relationship with his father was further explored in addition to meeting many new fighters. Katsumi and Hanayama got screen time and both participated in a good fight. It goes without saying, but the fights were great. After all, that's what was expected from an underground tournament. It's not a favorite arc, but I must admit that it has many valuable elements to say that it is boring. One of my favorite arcs is Baki's childhood. This part of the story is where it all begins, where we meet the protagonist and the characters who will accompany him on his journey to become the strongest man on the planet. The main plot of this part of the story shows Baki trying to win his mother's love. To achieve this, he undergoes rigorous training and survival tests, all in order to become stronger and be able to defeat his father. The fact is that he did it only to get some affection from his mother, since the only way she would pay attention to him is if he manages to defeat Yujiro. This is sad for Baki, because his mother only sees him as a tool to entertain Yujiro. Emi has secured the best trainers and gyms for Baki to get stronger. It's like she's cooking a fine meal for Yujiro. This entire first part of the story narrates Baki's odyssey in search of his mother's love, a love completely eclipsed by his father. People might think Baki is a lucky kid because his family is very prominent. His mother is very wealthy, and his father is the strongest man in the world. Despite this, Baki feels like the poorest and most miserable boy in the world. All he wants is a normal family like any other, but that has been denied to him. This part of the story features the first fight between Baki and Yujiro, a fight where the ogre demonstrated why he is known as the strongest creature on Earth. This fight was a turning point for Baki, and it was here that he stopped being a child and became a man. Perhaps this part doesn't have the best fights, but it certainly carries a lot of narrative significance for the story. The animated version skips some parts of the manga and has some censorship, so I would recommend reading the manga first and then watching the animated version. The arc of the 5 death row inmates is full of action and brutal fights. Personally, it's one of my favorites, and I love the screen time given to each of these characters. The plot of this arc introduces us to the 5 convicts after their prison escape, each arriving in Japan, seeking the taste of defeat. This premise is interesting as it suggests that these men had always won their fights, yet this monotony left them bored, and they no longer craved victory, but rather longed to experience defeat. Obviously, they were not going to be easily defeated. If someone wanted to beat them, they had to be a better fighter. Each criminal sought opponents who could give them the defeat they so desired. As expected, Baki and his friends were the ones to deliver this defeat to the 5 criminals. The highlight of this arc were the fights, my favorite being Hanayama versus Spec. Without a doubt, this fight will remain among the best of the series. Spec pushed Hanayama to the limit, and for a moment, I thought the criminal would win, but in the end, the indestructible Hanayama emerged victorious. Dorian was also a fan-favorite character, and his fighting style was among the best. He knew how to play dirty and had not an ounce of honor, making him more fearsome. The only downside was his ending, as he lost his memory and regressed to a baby-like state. In my personal opinion, Doyle was the convict with the most development in this arc. The other 4 stayed true to their convictions, but Doyle changed his perspective on things after spending time with Katsumi, learning to appreciate life the hard way. Sikorsky was a punching bag for several fighters, but despite this, he was fun to watch. So, he eventually grew on me. I couldn't connect with the Yanagi, but I think I wasn't the only one. Of the 5 convicts, he generated the least interest for me. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on each of these criminals and also share your opinion on this arc. The legendary swordsman Musashi Miyamoto had his own arc in the Baki series, and I must confess that I liked it a lot. So much so that I have decided to put it in 3rd place. Some people consider that this arc was very long and slow, but the truth is that it wasn't so much. Although there were almost 200 chapters, most were very short, and you could read up to 10 chapters in a couple of minutes. Well, the antagonist of this arc is the most powerful swordsman in all of history. His body is cloned and his soul is brought back to give life to that artificial body. Definitely, Musashi fulfilled his role as antagonist, and every time he appeared, he commanded respect. I really liked how Musashi developed once he awoke. He was incredulous before this new and modern world, but did not feel intimidated. On the contrary, he was excited to explore it. This is how this journey through modern Japan begins. In this country, he meets Baki and his friends and gives us several memorable fights like that epic confrontation he had against Hanayama in the streets of Tokyo. I loved how Itagaki represented Musashi. He had a calm demeanor and seemed carefree. One could even say he looked friendly. The reality is that this man was pure destruction, and he proved it when he faced the army and police of Japan with only his sword. Musashi said that he wanted to take the place held by Yujiro Hanma, that is, the title of the strongest. His goal in this new world was to regain the fame and recognition he had hundreds of years ago when he was considered a kind of demon. Unlike Pickle, Musashi did not adapt to this modern world and wanted to forcefully take what he believed he deserved. This is one of the reasons why Baki set out to defeat him and send him back to the other world. I think Musashi represented a real and latent danger that had not been felt for a long time. Every time a fighter faced him, we were expecting what could happen. After what happened with Retsu, we all feared for the lives of our favorite characters. Yujiro also faced Musashi, and although their fight was interrupted, he recognized that the swordsman was the only one who could share his place at the top of the food chain. This speaks highly of him, since despite only having a brief exchange of blows with the ogre, this was enough to earn his respect. And well, I hope that this arc is animated very soon, as after the father versus son fight, this arc is next. The father versus son arc is undoubtedly a masterpiece, perhaps not the longest since it only features one major fight. However, I can confidently say that this fight is the best in the entire series. Baki versus Yujiro was the most anticipated clash by the series fans, and it undoubtedly met our expectations. The fight was beautifully executed from start to finish, filled with emotions and symbolism. This arc served as a conclusion for both Baki and the fans who accompanied him on this long journey. The son finally gave his father what he had longed for, a fight where he had to use all his power without holding back. The ogre expressed his emotion at various times and made it clear to Baki that he was proud of him, even patting him on the head, something he never did even when Baki was a small child. It could be said that with only one major fight, this arc established itself as one of the best in the series because it was essentially the fight everyone was waiting for. The entire plot of the series was based on Baki trying to defeat his father, Yujiro. It was also moving to see Jack crying as he watched Baki do something that seemed impossible to him, giving his father a good fight. Another interesting moment was when we got a brief glimpse into the past of Yujiro Hanma, Yujiro's father and Baki's grandfather. In that brief flashback, we learn how powerful and feared Yujiro was. He was so feared to the point that the US military considered dropping an atomic bomb on Yujiro's location. Perhaps the animated series did not capture the essence of the manga with this fight, but that does not diminish its value in placing this arc in the top 2 of the list. Honestly, this incredible fight deserves a full video analyzing every aspect of it, so I won't dwell much on giving my reasons for ranking the father versus son fight so high on this list. I'll just say that I loved every part of this arc. The dinner and the exchange of thoughts between the two were a total delight. Even the brief Shiba versus Baki fight was entertaining. Retsu's story as a boxer was not my favorite part of the arc, but I believe it served its purpose in giving more character development to Retsu, and showed us that even the best fighters have some problems when stepping out of their comfort zone. In summary, this was a short but wonderful arc, especially because it featured the most epic fight of the entire Baki series. Well, the first place was pretty obvious at this point. In my opinion, the Ultimate Tournament is the best arc of the Baki series for its amazing fights and high narrative value. In this part of the story, we meet many characters, some of whom will be important in the future and will accompany Baki on his journey to become the strongest in the world. Characters like Retsu, Doppo, and Katsumi have screen time and showcase their fighting styles as they try to advance in the tournament that seeks to crown the champion of underground fights. There were also characters like Am and IU, and who played their roles as antagonists very well. Shiba was another character who gave his all on the battlefield, even earning Hanayama's respect. I really liked that the secondary characters got screen time and that it didn't all revolve around Baki. This tournament had several memorable moments, and some not so much, however. The fights were its main attraction, as even characters who seemed like fillers gave good fights, and thanks to that, we still remember them now. But undoubtedly the biggest draw of this arc was the appearance of Jack Hammer, who we later learned was Yujiro's son and Baki's half-brother. What I liked most about this arc is that we got a lot of context about Jack and also information about Yujiro's past. Here we learn about Yujiro's journey in the conflict in Vietnam, and saw that from a young age, he was always a warrior feared by everyone. I love the way Jack approached Yujiro and confessed to him that he was his son. The ogre was shocked for a few seconds, but then understood the situation and told Baki that no one but Jack had the right to challenge him, which is why he would be waiting for him if he managed to defeat Baki in this tournament. Well, we all know that Baki and Jack faced off in the grand final. It was a beautiful fight, and I dare say it's the second best fight of the entire series, only behind the father versus son fight. The reason I put this arc in first place over The Last Supper is because it had more chapters and therefore had more important content for the series, as well as greater narrative value. I also chose to place the Maximum Tournament in first place, since this entire arc perfectly captures the essence of the series. This is everything a Baki fan is looking for, fights and more fights, but if you add a lot of narrative content to enrich the story, you're definitely going to have a great time watching or reading the Maximum Tournament arc. Another notable moment is when Yujiro loses control and starts causing chaos in the arena. The ogre beats up several of the participants, but in the end, he was stopped with a net and tranquilizer darts. This was a shocking and bizarre moment, but it's also thanks to this scene that the Maximum Tournament is so remembered by fans. But as I said before, the biggest draw of this tournament was the fight between Baki and Jack, a duel of brothers that moved many people due to the emotional charge both fighters brought to the fight. It was beautiful to see Jack praising Baki, as we all thought Jack would hold resentment and hatred due to what Yujiro did to his mother. But that was not the case, and Jack showed us that the son will not always be a copy of the father. And well, friends, after thoroughly analyzing the arcs of Baki, I'd like to give some final comments. First, let's talk about how each arc of Baki is not just a series of brutal fights. These battles are, in fact, the setting for a deep exploration of themes such as legacy, rivalry, and honor. What's great about Baki is how the author always keeps us on the edge of our seats, Not just because of the fights, which are epic, but also because of how he handles the stories and characters. Each arc is unique and adds something new and exciting to the series, keeping everything fresh and interesting. And come on, who hasn't gotten excited watching Baki and his friends face gigantic challenges, both physical and emotional? From trying to earn his mother's love to the final showdown with his father, the series takes us on an incredible journey that goes beyond punches and kicks. So, in conclusion, Baki is not just for action fans. It has a rich story and characters that really evolve and grow. It shows us that even in a world filled with extremely powerful fighters, the biggest battles are often internal. And that, friends, is what makes Baki such a great and memorable series. And well, I hope you enjoyed this analysis as much as I enjoyed making it. And don't forget to leave me your opinions in the comments. What is your favorite arc? Is there anything you would change? Let me know your opinion in the comment box. And well, friends, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you liked it. I hope you have a nice day or night. See you soon.